Show Little City 56 TV and any other electronic devices. Welcome. Thank you for being involved in the Show Little Council meeting tonight. I asked Councilman Hatch if he would do the invocation, and I'll do the pledge. If anybody would like to join us, please stand.
Our kind and gracious Heavenly Father, as we come before Thee for this Show Little City Council meeting, we ask that Thy Spirit will be with us and that the decision that we make will be firm and be correct. We ask a blessing on those that serve our community in law enforcement. We ask that Thou will be with them, watch over them, and return them safely home to their families. We thank Thee for the people that take the time to come to these meetings. We ask that we will be able to fulfill our obligations to the city. And we'll say this in the name of Thy Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Please join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. At this time, I'd like to just thank everybody that took time off on Thursday to stand out along the highway to be with Officer Kelly Wood as he's coming through Show Little and down into White River. Just want to show our appreciation to a hero that put his life on his line, and for all of us here, not only in the White Mountains, but all over the place. And so we just ask that these blue lights, it's downtown Show Little, stay lit, and it's a reminder to everybody that these fallen police officers gave their all for all of us throughout the whole United States, not just for the Show Little, Arizona, or White River. So please, when you see those lights, please be reminded about that. Next is call to the public. If anybody, any citizen shall speak on the matter not on the schedule on the agenda may do so at this time. City Council cannot discuss or act on any items presented during the call to the public. Please limit your comments to about 3 minutes. Anybody for the call to the public? Okay, see nobody move. We close the call to the public and move to special events. Tonight, we have a presentation by Betsy Ann Wilson, Program Director for NPC Family and Friends.
Good evening. Thank you, Vice Mayor. Also, good evening, Council. This is probably the most scintillating presentation you're going to hear all year, because what I'm talking about tonight is a little overview of the college's finances and how our finances work. And we thought this would be a timely topic to cover for this meeting because the college is currently involved in its budgetary planning for the upcoming fiscal year, and you all can probably relate to that. So just to give you some brief background, I am the Executive Director of NPC Friends and Family, which is the college's nonprofit foundation, but I'm also taking care of some community outreach and getting to know our communities and helping them get to know us. So to give you just a little background that I've talked to you about before, our legal name is Navajo County Community College District, and doing business as Northland Pioneer College since 1974. We are a political subdivision, which means that we receive our authority to operate through the Arizona Revised Statutes. And so to that end, we are able to levy property taxes in Navajo County. There are 10 community college districts in the state, and they serve counties. And so we serve Navajo County as Navajo County Community College District, and we also serve Apache County by intergovernmental agreement. We have 9 locations throughout the 2-county area, with 2 of them, Springerville and St. John's in Apache County. We are audited annually by the Arizona Auditor General's Office, and they not only audit our financials, but also our enrollment and the expenditure limits. And we operate on a fiscal year that runs July 1 through June 30th of every year. So to talk about the historical and current community college funding model, historic funding model for community colleges was predicated on a kind of one-third basis, with the state providing appropriations based on a formula. And in Arizona, the primary formula driver is enrollment. And we measure enrollment, as I think I told you before, by full-time student equivalents, or what we call FTSE. And for our intents and purposes, a FTSE is 15 credit hours. Students provide funding. So in the historical model, a third of that would have been tuition, books, and fees from students. And then local support comes from the citizens for their community college in the form of property taxes. So you can see that NPC's current model, and this was taken from our 1819 audit, is much different from that. And the state, you'll see, is about 25% of that and provides support through what we call equalization. And I'll talk a little bit more about equalization in a couple of slides. The student costs have declined, not really, it's a little bit misrepresentational that it says 7% of students, because some of that is now included in grants and contracts. So it's still tuition and fees and that kind of thing. But if students are receiving financial support through the federal Pell Grant, for example, that's now included in grants and contracts. And then the local support, the community property owners provide the largest support at over 40%. So the community is the key in the funding model. And other supports come from grants and contracts, and that little bitty slice is kind of miscellaneous things like when we sell something at auction, some kind of surplus at auction, or the cosmetology students have some funding from cutting hair or doing nails. That's where that comes from. So as a political subdivision, we have the authority to tax, and Arizona has a maximum tax limit on property taxes, which is limited to 2% over the prior year's levy, plus an increase for new construction. NPC can't exceed the maximum levy, and the Arizona Revised Statutes, in fact, requires us to put public notices in newspapers, to publish press releases, and to put a posting on our website notifying the public of our intent to levy taxes. And we're also required to hold a hearing for the public before the district governing board either approves or disapproves whatever the proposal is for that year. And notice that in both fiscal year 2018-19 and in the current fiscal year 19 and 20, we have not levied the max. The rate was approximately 1.82 for those 2 years. So let's move on and talk about, I promised you, state appropriations. So state appropriations for maintenance and operations are a pretty small part of the budget. In 2010 and 11, they accounted for about 3.6 million of our operation and maintenance, and in 1920 only about 1.6 million. So they have been declining. The state provides additional funding to community college districts that have populations below 500 and have assessed valuation below a calculated minimum. So this is formula driven. And so Northland Pioneer College, NPC, or National County Community College District, is included in those community colleges that get additional appropriations. So our equalization was 6.6 million in fiscal year 2010-11, and currently it's about 7.8 million. And then this is kind of a reflection on the increase that we're getting in state equalization. It is kind of a measure of how Navajo County is falling behind with, property taxes and growth and that kind of thing. Because ideally, we would like to see that the state equalization aid was zero, because we were on a par with everyone else. In the STEM and workforce programs, on that little tiny bit, 339,500. This is a little capital provision from the state that addresses science, technology, engineering, and mathematical capital expenses, and it's been around only for the past few years. That we didn't have it in 2010 and 2011. So our tuition, this has been a hot topic. I was actually watching the evening news tonight about the tuition at the state universities versus tuition at community colleges, and they were recalling that the Arizona Constitution states that college tuition should be as nearly free as possible. And to that end, NPC has tried to uphold that. We still do have the lowest tuition rate per credit hour in the state. In 2017-18, it was $72 and went to $74 in 18-19, and currently in this fiscal year, we're at $77. In February, the board heard and discussed ideas for the next 3 academic years, what tuition will be. They'll make a final decision on that when they'll hear the full budget proposals in March, and then they'll vote on them in April. And the college tries to project tuition at least 3 years out to give students the opportunity to plan for what may be to come. So our enrollment is declining. That's something that we've talked about a little bit. And this is a national trend, but it's also kind of a local trend. It's related to both our aging population and the economy. And so in a broad picture, when economics, when the economy itself is strong, people tend not to go to community college because they're employed or fully employed. And when the economy is weaker or there's a downturn in the economy, people tend to seek out maybe retooling for a new job or some other kind of training, and so they go back to community college. So there's that element that kind of comes into play both locally and nationally. In Navajo County, we're also kind of dealing with what the census keepers call the birth dearth, where we have Blue Ridge High School noted that they have a population of high school kids and middle school kids that's pretty strong. Their enrollment is pretty high, but at the elementary level, it's quite low. And that's just because there weren't any babies at that time. And this is important to us to look at these trends because these in 10 years or so, these will be the students that we get from the high schools. So we have to look at these trends as well. The other thing I wanted to point out to you about tuition, down at the bottom, it says 2015-16 CTE FTSE counted as 1.3 versus 1.0. CTE is, recall that that's what we call career and technical education, what used to be vocational education. And what the formula did in 2015-16 was allow an additional 0.3 to be added to a FTSE count, because of the fact that it costs a lot more to offer a class for welding than, say, history. If you think about a history class, you have an instructor and a classroom, and maybe even the distance learning platform that we use, and some textbooks. Whereas if you have a welding class, you have to have a welding shop, and you have to have booths, and you have to have equipment, and you have to have tools, and you have to have supplies, and you have to have the instructor. And then the enrollment's usually capped because you have a finite space and finite amounts of equipment that everybody can have. So ideally, we'll talk about that a little bit. Ideally, that should probably be higher than 1.3. So when we look at our expenses, our employees are our greatest asset. And because we are a service organization, the expenses related to employees, so their compensation and benefits, make up the majority of our expenditures. Another strength that we have is the fact that we are a decentralized institution. We are taking education to our students where they are. That was something our founding fathers committed to and something our subsequent boards have upheld the commitment to. But by the same token, if you'll think about that in terms of maintenance and operation and employees, that's 9 different little colleges at 9 different locations versus one centralized location. But we feel it's important because we feel like we need to take education out across the 21,000 square mile surface area where there would not otherwise be any. So about the expenditure limit, this is an obstacle that's currently facing all the community colleges in Arizona, and it's provided for in both the Constitution and the Arizona Revised Statutes. And I know that y'all are familiar with it to a degree because it also affects cities and towns. And the intent back in 1979, when it was established, was to limit government spending. But the formula that was created then really kind of doesn't make sense now. It was first of all predicated on a model that predicted or projected continuous growth, and we haven't had continuous growth. All counties haven't enjoyed the same growth as other counties, and it was also put forth at a time when, if you think about it's really hard to imagine how we get along without computers and technology. But in 1979, nobody had a personal computer, nobody had a cell phone, and so now these are things that community colleges and K-12 districts, as well as municipalities, rely heavily on, and that was never even factored into the equation. So the community colleges are working together to try to make legislative changes that will affect the formula in a way that is more beneficial to the community colleges. So some of the options include changing the weighting of FTSE from 1 FTSE or even 1.3 FTSE for CTE to maybe something like 4. Because when you think about it too, community colleges in 1979 were more of what we now kind of think of as junior colleges. And the public and the students expected a community college was to permit a student to take 2 years and then matriculate to a bachelor's degree granting institution. Well, now that's kind of become almost a backseat or a smaller part of what community colleges do. and they're looked at more and more as a workforce creator. And as you know, we have a lot of these CTE programs that are literally college to career. And while they're in high demand and the community colleges are expected to provide them, they are a lot more costly than the general education classes to provide. So that's another, another one of the ways that they're looking at possibly trying to affect the formula. I have been asked, why don't they just get rid of it? You can't, it's not that simple because it's tied to the Arizona Constitution. So if we eliminated the formula, it would require a constitutional amendment. So some exclusions are allowed in the expenditure limit, and this slide sort of shows our annual expenditure budget supported by revenues, but then the expenditure limit that we have to abide by, and which is formula driven and focuses on enrollment. So some exclusions include federal grants, tuition, interest income, debt, construction of new building, renovations. But one of the big things that falls under our expenditure limit is back to our maintenance and operations. So think about that pie with the huge chunk of it being our employees. That falls under our expenditure limit. Maintenance and operations for 9 locations falls under the expenditure limit. So when enrollment declines, the students who are still enrolled still need services. So you can't really look at reducing services as an option, but providing services more efficiently and effectively has always been important and continues to be important. And utilizing technology to provide services has been a way that we've been able to do that. So for the current fiscal year, 1920, the annual expense budget is $28.7 million, but the expenditure limit is only $14.7 million. So that's how much we're allowed to spend. And even with the exclusions, NPC may use carry forward from previous years to exceed the threshold. We do so at a little peril because we can be fined for exceeding the threshold. This year so far, we have not done so, and usually if there's a breach, it's less than $1 million. So that brings us to our current fund balance, and so when we have revenues that exceed expenditures, we're able to put aside savings, and that was done for a number of years at Northland Pioneer College. So our unrestricted funding for things like capital improvements is $49.1 million, and that's the money that we will be using to do this new capital facilities project that we've talked to y'all about here at the White Mountain campus in Show Low. That's the $20 million projected for that. The strategic planning and savings has guided us and enabled us to do that. So that concludes my presentation. And if you'd like to find more information about NPC's finances, you can go to our website at npc.edu, and you'll find information including district governing board documents, our audited financial statement, our single audited financial statements are there, our annual approved budget, the comprehensive annual financial report, or the CAFR, and our annual expenditure limit and FTSE report as well. And I would be happy to field any questions if I can, and if it's beyond the scope of my understanding, because I'm not a finance person, I'd be happy to also direct you to Mataria Ellison, who is our Vice President for Administrative Services, and President Vest, who's here in the audience and could probably pinch hit too. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Betsy Ann. Any questions or comments or anything else from the council?
I have a question. Just based on a general figure of the people that enroll, what is the success rate at the end of that enrollment period? Do you have any figures on that?
On the success rate? Right. That's a complicated question, and promise you I'm not trying to evade it. We have data that we collect and publish that's required by the state and federal authorities. That's called IPEDS data that's published on our website. And it's difficult to answer because how do we define success? There are some students who come to us strictly because they want to get a certificate in welding and get a job right away. And then there are students who want to complete an Associate of Science degree and transfer to NAU to study forestry. So typically community college students across the board throughout the United States, a community college associate degree, like for transfer, or an Associate of Applied Science, which is a two-year degree, takes more like 4 years or 4.5 years for a community college student to complete. But how many students drop out? How many students actually complete? Do you have figures on that, Mark?
Well, try to answer this a couple of ways.
Okay, thank you.
So, what we would like to have, and we want to have at some point, is what the Department of Economic Security was tasked several years ago by the governor's office to provide us. What they are supposed to be providing to the community colleges is actual job placement rates for students out of all of our programs. We don't have that from DES yet because they frankly have never been able to make the software work. But we do have to track some of our students who are in Carl Perkins, which is a federal grant program, for example. We know how our nursing students, for example, perform on what's called the NCLEX, which is the nursing completion exam, the nursing certification exam. We know how our students compare when they move on to a university to the freshman classes at, say, ASU, U of A, or NAU. And for example, our full-time students who enroll at NPC, move on to the state universities, graduate at a slightly higher rate than the incoming freshman classes do at those universities, right? And we know some of that, there's an economic factor to that, there's a financial factor, that if you come to a community college, whether it's NPC or any other community college, your first 2 years are so much cheaper that your family's in a better position to help you actually cross the finish line with that bachelor's degree. In the areas that we can track, we know that over a 10-year average, our nursing students perform at or better than the the RN students at state universities on the NCLEX certification exam. We know that our placement rate in welding, for example, of students who want to pursue careers in welding is over 90%. So, we have all of these different individual measures, and I can certainly provide that, kind of aggregate some of that and provide it to you at a future update.
I think I'd be interested in seeing some of that. And then
Absolutely.
the matriculation rate and where they land in the higher
Right.
bracket
Right.
and the success rate that's tied back to that.
Yeah,
Because they're getting a good base here, it sounds like.
that's right.
It would help them along. And you mentioned the success rate,
Mhm.
but that's what I'd like to see something tied back to.
We also have figures that show that state and nationwide, students who complete coursework, whether it's a certificate or an associate's degree, beyond high school, and please don't hold me to these numbers because I'm trying to dredge them up from memory, about $500,000 over their work life in additional earnings compared to somebody with just a high school diploma. We being the community college system in the state, just received on Friday the final version of an economic impact study done by a group called MC out of Montana, who does this nationwide for public organizations. We'll be putting out a press release soon about that. We'll have it on our board agenda in March, and I'd be happy to provide it to Mr. Mooter, and he can pass it out to you as well. That shows kind of on a dollar for dollar basis what a taxpayer gets, what a student gets, and what the community gets when they spend a dollar on supporting the community college locally. And the return on investment, depending on which group you fall into, is anywhere from 2 to 1.
Thank you.
Any other questions? We got one more, Councilman.
Just a quick comment. I know being on the local workforce board and your staff's participation in that board is really integral into providing career pathways for our local population. And so we really appreciate that. And then the city's partnership with that and the Navajo counties is really important. And so MPC provides a really great service for our community, and we appreciate you being here.
Thank you, and I'd like to echo that we appreciate the participation of the business community in many of our focus groups, and the CTE division as a whole has advisory boards that are made up of like the welding community, the automotive community, the nursing, what have you, and we have professionals that participate on those boards and give us really good input about what we should be teaching as well. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, now let's move to the consent calendar. Is there anything that needs to be pulled or for discussion on the consent calendar? Okay, I'll read what we have on the consent calendar. Acceptance of the Governor's Office of Highway Safety Grant, authorization of associated budget transfer, and consideration of the minutes of the Shoal City Council regular meeting of February 18th, 2020. Can I have a motion to accept that?
I move to approve the consent calendar as presented.
Do we have a motion by Councilwoman Kakavas?
Second.
We got a second by Councilman Kelly. All in favor, say aye, or raise your hand. Opposed? Is there any other discussions or anything else on it that anybody has? Okay, so the vote, I didn't look up, sorry about that. So that passes 4-0. Okay, now let's move on to new business. Consideration and request of annexing properties located south of Cub Lake Road into the city of Show Low, AP numbers 21203 137B, 21203 138, and 21203 219P and P-1320. Justin.
Thank you. Before I start, just a clarification. The agenda title, as included on the council has, indicates a parcel number of 21203-219P. That actually is 019P. The correct parcel number is referenced in the staff summary report, as well as the subject property map that you have before you this evening. A little bit of a background information. Brad and Shannon Edgington and Ken and Sharon McFall have approached the city requesting annexation of property known as AP numbers 21203, 137B, 138, and 019P into the city of Show Low to allow for connecting to city sewer. Staff will review the attached map during the meeting. We've got that on the overhead right now. Essentially what you can see in front of you, the kind of green crosshatched would be the existing city limits. You can see this is Cub Lake Road on the north side. We've got what would be Walgreens here on the corner, Walmart across the street, Lowe's is directly back here. We've got the Mountain Meadow subdivision. And then we have this little county island that you see just in the white. The subject properties are outlined in the blue and are the 3 properties on the southeast portion of that county island. The council may want to explore the possibility of expanding the annexation. So these 3 properties, plus the possibility of the remaining properties within that white county island area. Total number of properties, including the properties highlighted, is 11. 3 are owned by the Edgingtons and the McFalls. The city actually owns this piece of property over on the far southwest of the map. We've got a well site there. So the council may want to explore the possibility of expanding the annexation area to create a more logical annexation boundary. If so, the council would direct staff to contact the property owners in the expanded area to see if they would be interested in being annexed into the city. Once all interested property owners have been identified, the council would direct staff to move forward with the annexation by filing the official map and blank annexation petition. Within 30 days from the date of filing in Navajo County, the property owners would be notified and a public hearing would be held before the council. Following the public hearing, staff would collect signatures from the affected property owners, the signed petition would be filed, and the council would be presented with an ordinance for annexation. This is a very simplified version of what happens during an annexation. There are a number of steps. There's a number of steps that have very specific timelines. For example, within the 30 days, we have to file for a public hearing. That has to happen within the last 10 days of the 30 days, just as an example. Also, if we do move forward with filing a blank petition, and then we have a property owner or the council desires to change that blank petition, we then have to start the process over. So what we're coming to the council tonight essentially is a preliminary step. If the council directs staff to approach the other property owners within that county island, we would do that before we would file the blank petition. That way we don't have somebody coming to us later and saying, I would have wanted to be in had I known. And we don't have somebody coming back later and saying, you've got me on your list and I didn't want to be on it. So what this would do is allow us then, if the council so directs, to approach the remaining property owners within that county island to determine whether they are interested in participating in this annexation or not. With that, I'm available for questions. The McFalls as well as the Edgingtons are also here. and they've indicated that they would also be available for questions if necessary.
Okay, any questions for staff? Councilwoman Cookums?
So I recognize that we like to not have little islands in our city limits of county islands to provide better service. But other than that, what are the benefits to the city to have these properties annexed? And I would suggest that we try and annex all of those properties into the city limits. And then what are the utilities and the paved roads within those areas?
Sure. So benefits to the city, I think you've touched on the primary one. It would help clean up some of our city limits that we have. Essentially what happened is the area to the north where this subdivision is, that was located in the county. And I think in about 2006, we were approached by the property owner who requested that to be annexed in. At that time, we did approach the other property owners here to the south. And at that time, none of them were interested. So council and staff moved forward with just the one that had originally petitioned for annexation, which left us with that county island that we have there in the middle of the map. Having the unified city limit boundaries does help with things such as if somebody calls, for example, 911, who responds? In these county islands, it's difficult. Is it the police department that gets sent, or is it the sheriff's department that gets sent? That puts a burden on our dispatchers. So that would help with that type of thing. As far as utilities go, there is city water available in this area. These properties are served by city water. The city sewer actually comes and was stubbed right to the kind of the north portion of the subject properties. But because they're outside of the city limits, we can't actually allow them to connect. So both city water and city sewer are available to these properties. Private utilities, I know that electric is in the area. I'm not sure about gas, not sure about cable, but the city utilities are all there.
Now, is the ribbon that surrounds this area, is that representative of the water company that we purchased back when?
Are you referring to the green line at the bottom?
Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting city limits boundary.
Good question.
Why is that?
Back in about the 80s, is that
1980. Yeah.
the city council annexed essentially a 5-foot strip that ran along and out to a Forest Service parcel. This piece that you see on the bottom that you refer to as a ribbon, that is that 5-foot strip. So we have the city limits on the north, and then we have a 5-foot strip on the very south of this. Today, under state law, we would not be even able to propose doing something like that. But back in the 80s, annexation laws were a little bit looser, and they annexed that as, I think, a means to make sure that our borders were protected.
Yes, Councilman Kelly.
Yeah, okay. The bolden outline of blue are 3 property owners coming to the city and saying, would you please annex us? We would like to hook in to the city sewer system. And while they could hook into the water system, the reason for that is we purchased a water company that serviced an area outside the city limits, and that caused the city to provide water through that system, but not sewer. Now, the rest of these properties outlined or shaded at not as in white, could they hook on to sewer? And if so, would there be an expense to the city or an expense to the individual property owners for extension of lines? That's what I'm getting.
Right. Currently, we do not allow properties that are located outside of the city limits to connect to city sewer.
I understand that. I'm saying if they were annexed.
Yes. Okay.
I didn't say that. I thought it, and you should pay attention to what I'm thinking.
I understand. I'll try harder. The existing sewer line runs down Sutter Drive and ends at that southern terminus of the subdivision that's there. It does not extend all the way down to the other portion of the city limits here on the south.
Okay.
So the properties that are directly adjacent to the Sutter Drive alignment, the sewer is available there. The properties that are located to the west of those, there is not sewer currently available to those properties. And so there would be an extension required of the city main.
About the two to the north.
Due to the north, there is a sewer line directly in front of them.
So to the properties that are white in color on the map, and that would then be to the west of the blue outlined properties. I don't know if the audience can follow this. We don't even have an estimate of what it would cost them to, and the flow, is it to the south, or is it flat enough if we ran a line to the north? They would be able to tie into it. I would say one thing that I believe is consistent with our policy, if we annex these folks that are asking to be annexed, they would provide easement for that sewer line to get to other property. Am I right?
We have discussed with them the possibility of doing an easement along the north side of what would be parcel 019P. That's the parcel there to the west. There has not been any design or anything like that done on what a potential sewer line, public sewer line through there would look like. We're very preliminary on all of this. So
We can stand there and look. If it's steep, falling to the south, we'd know that probably isn't going to do much good.
pretty flat. So,
But if it's pretty flat and we know how deep our main is, a little bit of common sense goes somewhere a long way. If I own one of those pieces and I can't get into the sewer, I'm going like, how does it help me to be annexed?
Mhm.
And I know there are people that say, I don't want one more level of government over me if I'm going to get a building permit. And they probably don't know our building code's the same as the county, last I understood. I don't know about the fees, all of the fees. I don't know if they're the same or not. I would think you would be prepared to answer that question if I owned one of those and you were approaching me saying, you want in, Gene? I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out. I understand if there's a 911 call for emergency services and life is threatened due to mutual aid, our police department is going to respond the same as the county, the same as the state highway patrol people and all. So I know in times past, there have been cities try to use the idea of personal safety as a lever and why you want to be in the city, because your family is all going to get done unmentionables to and killed because we won't respond. Well, that's just not true. Okay, so I know we're not going to be doing that. The two pieces that would fill in the blank the best would be the two to the north of those asking to come in. The others, I would say, bring them in if they want in, don't if they don't. But let's ask them. That's
and
what I'm
I
saying.
believe that's been the policy of the council in the past is, you're not going to force somebody to come into the city if they don't want to come in, but at least extend the invitation and see where they're at. And so that's an option with the council this evening is, do we extend the invitation and see where they're at, or do we just move forward with the three that have made the request?
Thank you.
Councilwoman Cookhouse.
So on this map, it looks like there's a number of flag lots. And are these properties Do they have proper access to a city roadway that is up to city standard?
Right, so I switched over to the aerial so we could see kind of the properties that are developed versus the ones that are not.
Yeah.
There is one property directly to the north. It's kind of narrow. It is not developed. The property directly north to that does abut the city, that does have a home. The people that have requested, the McFalls and the Edgingtons, they own a business that's located here in the southeast corner. The other two properties that they own are currently not developed. However, they would like to place a home on the property to the west, and they would like to place a utility type building on the northern property that they're requesting. Three other properties are also there. Those all have homes on them. Each one of these properties abuts either a city street or a county street. You can see Sutter Lane was put in. That was actually built to city standards, even though it's in the county at this location. You also have, I believe it's Forest Lane that these properties have access to. There is one property that's kind of the one with a slanted top on it there in the middle. It does not have direct access to a street that we are aware of. All other properties abut a county road in this.
Now, they're county roads, but are they county roads that are at city standard? And if we annex them, would they have to be brought up to city standard for us to annex them?
So the only one that is to city standards is Sutter Lane. That is paved. It does have ribbon curb along the side. In the past, the city, when we've annexed property that has roadways, county roadways in it, we would recommend that we stop where that southern city boundary is. That does not include the county roadway that is directly in front of those properties. So the county would still be responsible for maintenance and upkeep on that portion of the road. Sutter Lane, because it would be entirely encircled about, would become a city street at that point.
So are these three properties then, do they have the proper 30-foot access to that roadway?
Yes, all three of these properties abut Sutter Lane with significantly more than just the minimum frontage that we would require.
Sutter Lane is not paved down into the blue outline, right?
No, it is. It's paved all the way to Forest.
Point on the map where it's paved.
So the existing city limits are here. It is paved all the way from Cub Lake Road, the intersection, all the way through to the existing city limits. And then it continues paved with ribbon curb through the county portion to this forest.
Oh,
So that road is built and does meet city standards, even though it's in the county.
Councilman Hatch.
Just to set this in my mind, you said that there was a business on the corner of that second lot down. Is that a business that sells material and things like that?
In the county, it's zoned CR, which is a commercial residential zoning district. They do some fabrications, different things there. It's mainly a wholesale type business. They don't do a lot of retail out of that.
Is it a knife?
They do. That's one of the things they do there. Yes.
Okay, good. That settles that in my mind.
Okay.
I would have a question. What of the people that have these lots that aren't encircled with the blue? They obviously have well, and they obviously have septic tanks. Is that correct?
They are on septic tanks because they are not located within the city, so they cannot be connected to the city sewer. There may be some that are connected to wells. My understanding is they're connected, though, to what was Ernie Sutter's water system that we purchased. My understanding is they are on city water at this point.
Okay.
so they have no motive.
Justin, I got a question for you. if we bring in all these lots and everything else, is our infrastructure for our sewer system, is that good enough? Will it handle it? Not handle it, or what?
The capacity is fine. You know, the number of lots that we're looking at here to add 11 lots onto our existing system that we have in place, that's not going to produce an issue for us. What we would need to sit down and verify, you know, if we move forward and if these property owners said that they were even interested,
They're not going.
is, you know, how in the real world, practically, how are they going to connect then to sewer? The 3 properties that have requested, it's very easy. Sewer is directly adjacent to that northern boundary. Extending it to the and the properties to the north, it's directly in front of them. So that's an easy one too. The question would be getting it to the properties to the west. And from a practical standpoint, how reasonable would that be? We have not spent a lot of time looking at that because we wanted to see where we were first with the annexation.
So if we annex it, then before all the paperwork is done through the county and everything else, are we going to be able to come back and give us a price of what, or some type of idea of what it's going to cost to get all those properties done or not?
I think we would work with our public works department and engineering department, you know, and see, number one, is this feasible? And number two, if it is, what is an estimate? You know, certainly I don't think we're going to sharpen the pencil to the point that we're down to, you know, pennies, but at least get a general idea of what we're looking at.
Any other questions? Councilwoman
Just a
Kukowski.
comment, I'm concerned with the access for those properties to the west. So to assist these homeowners today, I would suggest that we go with the northern properties and kind of shore that up and see if they're interested in joining this annexation. But until we get access to all the properties that's required by the city, I don't know if we would pursue that.
For the sewer line?
For the
or
west, for the sewer and the roadways.
No, we could do, you're just saying, ask the 2 properties on the north and take those 3 properties and the 2, if the 2 want to come in. And then if not, we'll go with the 3, but we'd probably like to add the city piece while we're doing this annexation.
Yeah, and the city piece is this one here on the far west.
So we still haven't had anybody besides the 2 right now that has asked us to do anything.
The
Correct.
two to the north, we haven't approached them. We know the McFalls or Edgertons have approached them, and they indicated they probably don't want to come into the city at this time. What we're asking the council, if you want us to approach them and see if they do and explain what it would entail if they came into the city.
I think I would prefer we at least ask the
And
question.
if they don't,
encourage
we'd like
that
to file the blank petition on what they've asked for so we can get moving on their annexation because they're getting ready to build a house on one of the properties.
Right. I agree. But I mean, a simple letter, if it's not answered, mailed to the address for the property tax bill, can we go with that as an inquiry? And if it's not answered within 10 days, consider it to be a no and proceed? I mean, if we can get them and talk to them direct, we make that effort, but we don't want to hold it up for months to wait and see if we can get a hold of them. I mean, to me, I can predict some of them's answer is going to be no, but we don't know that until we ask them.
We'll make contact with them quickly just because we know that they'd like to proceed with this annexation.
Is there
as soon
a
as they can.
time limit if we start making contacts that we have to give them to? I mean, a reasonable time is a reasonable time.
There really isn't anything specified that says it has to be done, you know, within a certain period of time, except once we do the blank petition, we have a year to collect the signatures. Nobody's interested in dragging this thing out for a year.
Not at all.
So,
So we get a verbal and move. Go for it.
Any other questions or comments or, yes, Councilman Hedge?
I'm ready to make a motion if
Go
it's
ahead.
appropriate. I move to direct staff to file the blank petition with the Navajo County Recorder for this proposed annexation according to the boundaries recommended by the city council. I would like to make a stipulation to that we approach the two that are to the north, and we also make a run towards the properties to the west. I've lived on properties that have perk problems on septics, and you don't know until you go talk to them if they're even interested. So if they have a well and they have a septic tank, give them the option to say yes or no to septic. And that would give us an idea how to plan that project.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I would ask a question.
Yeah, I just want to make it clear, though, that if the rest of the property owners say no, we're still going with the 3 properties.
Right.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right.
In the city.
And the city one, yeah.
What?
For clarification, if we were saying after a reasonable time of attempting to contact these other property owners, if the answer is either no or there's no response, we proceed with filing the blank petition on these 3 parcels only.
And the city property,
And the city property.
and the city property.
The
Oh,
furthest
and
to
the city
west.
property?
The
We
property
want
at
to
the furthest
annex
to the
our
west.
own property?
We would like to.
I'm
yeah.
not sure I would want that. That's fine. If for some reason we want that to be in the city, let's do it. Yes.
Okay, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I have one more
go ahead.
clarification. That if we, run it out to the west, it is required that they have to have the proper access to their properties for them to be annexed.
It is,
correct?
and they do have proper access, but with the way the annexation boundary would run, it would not include that access. It would not include the county road that's there. If we just go to the 5-foot line.
What about that slanted?
That's owned by the property owner right in front of it, so there's 3 properties there that are owned by the same person.
Okay.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, we got a second. We got a motion by Councilman Hatch and a second by Councilman Gavas. Any other further discussions? Okay, see no further discussions. Take a vote. All in favor, say, or raise your hand. All opposed? Okay, that passes 4-0. Thank you, Justin. Okay, let's move on to summary of current events. Anybody have anything that they'd like to report at this time? Go ahead,
I attended a meeting with the mayor and city manager and city attorney with Timber Mesa. We had a good meeting. I think we made some progress and we'll be presenting a counter proposal to them. I did want to clarify, there's a rumor out there that some of the firefighters felt like the city had an intention of maybe hiring non-firefighters to provide that service. That isn't our wish or intention, but these things take some negotiation back and forth, and so. But I do think that we made some progress, and hopefully we can come to an agreement soon.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, I'll go ahead. Just to give you some information, Jack Latham was on the city council here a long time ago, a few years ago. His wife, Johnny Ray, passed away December 26th. They're going to have a celebration of life this Saturday, March 7th at 11 o'clock at Grace Church at 700 South 19th Avenue in Show Low. The VFW, and Johnny Ray worked for VFW, did a lot of stuff for them and also for hospice. I don't think there was a person in town that didn't know Johnny Ray and that Johnny Ray didn't know them. So if you like to be there and support Jack on that, please just show up at 11 o'clock at Grace Church. Thank you. Turn the time over to the city manager, Ed Mutter.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Just a couple of items to report, or 3 of them or 4 here. In Public Works projects, we continue to have the work on West Cooley sewer main replacement and on North 16th Avenue water line extension. There's several other public works projects that are scheduled to begin soon around town. City crews have been busy performing ditch maintenance, replacing damaged and faded signs, and rehabilitating the old pavilion at City Park, and that's nearly complete. They lack some paving, but it's a nice transformation of that old pavilion there. And as always, we appreciate the patience as we try to improve the city infrastructure. Just an item on the census. 2020 U.S. Census is rapidly approaching. By April 1st, every home should receive an invitation to participate in the census. You will have 3 options for responding: online, by phone, or by mail. However, online forms will be the primary tool for responses in this census. Once you receive your invitation in the mail, which according to the census could be as early as March 12th, you can begin your 2020 census self-response. There are many benefits in participating in the census. The greater population, the more funding the city will receive. Population figures are used for a number of different reasons and purposes, including allocation of congressional representation and federal and state funding for local communities. Each individual resident counted in the census helps aid or add to the available funding for many projects and infrastructure and different things the city has to operate. So we invite even our seasonal residents to participate in the census. They can participate in the census by simply listing Show Low as their primary residence on the census form. If there are any questions about the census, you can call Justin Tregaskis at 928-532-4041. And there's a lot of information coming out on the census in the newspaper and social media and different venues there. The Recreation Department is making plans for upcoming spring play days, which will be held during spring break, March 16th through the 19th, from 8 a.m. to noon at the City Campus Teen Center. For boys and girls ages 5 to 12, the cost is $12 per day or $40 per week, and registration is required. The Recreation Department is also accepting applications for Grass Volleyball League through April 3rd. There will also be a co-ed men's division at a cost of $60 per team. And then they're also having registration for a co-ed men's and women's summer softball league through April 11th. For more information on the recreation programs, you can contact the Recreation Department at 532-4140. Thank you, Vice Mayor.
Thank you, Ed. Okay, this brings us to scheduling of meetings. Is there any meetings that need to be scheduled at this time?
Just one we need, just a reminder for the council. We've scheduled a special meeting for the council to interview applicants for city council vacancies. The meeting will be held on Tuesday, March 10th. That's next Tuesday at the City Hall Heritage Room across the street. And those will begin at 6 p.m.
Any other meetings or?
That's it. Thank you.
That's it? Okay, seeing no other business, I adjourn this meeting.